So this is a little demonstration of the difference between two temperaments. I have tuned the lower manual to Meantone temperament and the upper manual to Rameau, and I just wanted to demonstrate the differences between the two. The main characteristic of Meantone temperament is the fact that you have 8 pure major thirds. The other, of course, characteristic of it is what you do to the fifths. The fifths are slightly narrower than in equal temperament, except for one, and this is the fifth between A flat and E flat, which we call the wolf. And you can hear why. Basically, this is actually not a fifth at all. What it is a diminished sixth, because what you have is not really A flat to E flat, but rather G sharp to E flat. In Meantone temperament, you don't have enharmonics, so every key, every note, every key is a particular note and nothing else. So this one is a G sharp, not an A flat. And this one is a B flat, but not an A sharp. So it's very, very different from how we think in terms of enharmonics in equal temperament. And what is interesting about this is, of course, that we may think, okay, this is in some respects some sort of a disadvantage, but it isn't necessarily, because what it does is it enhances the expressive content of a piece, if you know how to write in this particular temperament. Rameau, on the other hand, what it does is it reduces the wolf so that you don't have any fifth like that anymore. So technically speaking, with Rameau, most keys are playable, and with Meantone temperament, there are keys that are not playable. For instance, you can imagine that since you don't really have an A flat, playing an A flat major is not possible. But with Rameau, it is. It has a certain flavor, but it's possible to play in it. So how this works in music, I think, is quite interesting, and that's what I want to demonstrate now. The first piece that I want to play is the Capriccio Cromatico by Tarquinio Merulla. And you will notice that because half steps are not equidistant, in Meantone temperament especially, the chromatic scale has a very, very particular flavor, which is brought out by the temperament. So let me play the beginning of this piece first in Meantone and then in Rameau, and notice the difference. Same passage, same excerpt now in Rameau temperament. So both temperaments give the chromatic scale a slight flavor that you don't have an equal temperament, but you can tell that clearly the Meantone temperament gives the chromatic scale a much more punchy, much more spicy flavor. So there's always a question of what is appropriate in a particular piece. So I'm not trying to suggest here that you should play a particular piece in one and only one particular temperament. I'm simply highlighting the differences between the two. The next piece that I wanted to demonstrate is a piece now in the key of C minor. This is a sarabande by Geoffroy, and of course C minor creates the problem of having to deal with the wolf, because E flat and A flat are part of the key signature, and we don't really have an A flat, we have a G sharp. So what I will do is I want to play the piece with repeats, and basically I will play in Meantone the first time, and then I will play the repeat in Rameau, and I tend to want to ornament when I repeat something, but I will try to remind myself not to ornament, so that you can really compare the two different temperaments. If I add something, I'm sorry, it's ingrained in me to not play what I see on the page. So sarabande by Geoffroy, C minor, first, both sections first in Meantone temperament, and the repeat in Rameau. So again, you can see the differences. Clearly with Rameau, you do have more of an A flat. On the other hand, I find it very interesting that I don't know whether Geoffroy is compensating for this, but you will notice that sometimes he hides the A flats in a place where it's not as obvious. So somehow he will move the A flats perhaps in a slightly different range of the keyboard, so that when you actually hear it, and of course you hear a G sharp, it doesn't seem to disturb very much. So I would say the piece is eminently playable in Meantone temperament. Again, the question is whether you are willing to listen, to deal with this, or you prefer the slightly more subtle coloring that you get from Rameau. The next piece that I wanted to play, this is not really written for Meantone temperament, or for Rameau for that matter, but just to show you what can happen when you start modulating, when you start changing keys. This is the Goldberg Variations, this is the aria from Bach's Goldberg Variations, and when you play in Meantone temperament and in Rameau, you gain something, you also lose something. Bach did not have Meantone temperament in mind, and he certainly also didn't have Rameau's temperament in mind, although I happen to like Rameau temperament, so Bach usually has to deal with it when I play him on this instrument. But I wanted to play the aria, and what I wanted to do is I wanted to play it straight through in Meantone, no repeats. And notice that we start in a very, very serene environment because of all the pure major thirds in the key of G major. But then when we get to the second section, and Bach starts, of course, moving a little further away harmonically, this moving further away is really felt. You can really hear it. Because, of course, Meantone temperament can't necessarily handle all the areas where Bach is traveling. You would still hear a slight flavoring even if you were to play it in an 18th century circular and equal temperament, something that Bach would have used. But here, of course, the flavor is much more pronounced. So let me play it straight through in Meantone temperament, and again, notice the change in the second section, but again, this serene calmness when we slowly start moving back towards G major by the end of the piece. Now compare the second section. I'm going to play just the second section now in Rameau temperament. You will feel again the little harmonic journey that Bach explores, but at the same time it's not going to be as spicy, let's put it that way. And of course, if one were to continue playing other variations from the Goldberg variations, eventually you would also get to the limits of both the Meantone temperament and eventually the Rameau. So for example, if I were to play the opening of the 25th variation, which I hope I can sight read without too many mistakes, you will notice that here clearly now Bach is moving in harmonic areas that Meantone temperament can't really handle. What I will do actually is I will play Bach wants this to be played on two keyboards. So what I will do is I will play the left hand on the upper keyboard, which is tuned to Rameau, and then the right hand, the melody, in other words, I will play in Meantone temperament. I'll just play the first few measures and notice how by now we are getting to a point where this temperament doesn't really work for Bach anymore. Etc., etc. The second half of this variation, you have D flats and C flats. So by that time, it can get pretty hairy. Anyway, so I just wanted to demonstrate the difference between the two temperaments, and I hope you enjoyed it. Thank you for listening and watching.